Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. Tonight I want to thank Jenna for her question on the video that I did, Then You Ain't Black, which references what Joe Biden's statement was, and it talks about cultural sensitivity. Jennifer says, I have a question that I'm not sure how to ask. I think I want to know if you are joking about a stereotype, as almost all of us do or have done. Is that insensitivity? How much of thinking of an entire group of people thinking the same way is buying into a stereotype? And while I feel that actually believing the stereotype is unacceptable, like CPT, is joking about it equally as unacceptable? I have a friend who constantly jokes about being CPT, being the reason why they're late all the time. We laugh, but neither of us actually believe CPT is real. So is joking about it unacceptable? And is it equally as unacceptable for the entire population or just certain races of people? Is it acceptable for a non-black person to joke about CPT outside of his or her circle of friends? My kids and were having a similar conversation at dinner. And the other night, there were different examples. If a non-black person said to a black person, whom he doesn't know, hey man, don't worry about being late, CPT, right? Would he laugh or be angry? And by the way, it infuriates me that we are at such a place in society where we overanalyze and overscrutinize everything and everyone says all the time. If a black man joked to another non-black man about being late because of CPT, would he laugh or be uncomfortable not knowing how to react? There are certain phrases and words I won't let my children and their friends, regardless of how old they are, use in my house. In my opinion, if a word or phrase can't be used in the entirety of the public without offending or upsetting someone or risking offending or upsetting someone, it is not appropriate word for general conversation. I think I changed the conversation from everyone in the group thinks the same way to stereotypes. What is the difference? Jennifer, this is an incredibly powerful question. And by the way, you just go on to say, holy crow, I'm embarrassed at how long-winded this is. Sorry, and don't ever need to apologize. Did I mention I love the video? And the reality is, like I said, there's nothing for you to apologize for. And your question is a really important question and a very difficult question. Normally, I give an answer to questions that people ask me. But sadly, I'm not going to give you an answer for this question. It's too complex, it's too diverse, and the reality is all of us in the entire stratosphere would have different answers to these questions. This is not a clear-cut, yes, this is, or no, there isn't. Humor and the way that humor is used and how people take it is a very personalized thing. So you always have to look at context, where it comes from, how it matters. And I love how when people say they know what is the right thing or not right thing, because it gets very gray, and I'm going to show you why it gets so gray very quickly. Obviously, when somebody has an anger, and a frustration with a particular group, and the words that are coming out of their mouth is vitriolic, and they are doing it as a design to be hurtful, then obviously that's totally unacceptable. When people make jokes, ethnic jokes, racial jokes, and they're trying to be funny, whether it be at a comedy club or old skits, it becomes much more difficult to determine the appropriateness or not appropriateness. There are many African American communities, comedians that make fun of African American communities. There are many white comedians that make fun of white ethnic groups, such as Irish or Polish, which there are a million Polish jokes. You have Jewish comedians making fun of Jewish people all over the place. And the nature of humor comes from the idea of being in good nature and good fun, that it's not meant to be that I want to destroy you or hurt you. But we live today in a society where people take things and they twist it and its meanings and its phases. And then it gets, again, very gray area. So I'm going to go through a few things, and I'm not going to necessarily give you answers, but this video is going to be designed maybe just to start a conversation, then get other people's points of view, because this is not a yes or no type of question. Where those lines are, where do you go too far? It gets very complex. So this is a remark by Joe Biden made in a rally in 2012 in Virginia. He went ahead and said on Tuesday that he got a lot of attention from the vice president, and he told a diverse crowd, including many African Americans, that Mitt Romney would put you all back in chains by unshackling Wall Street. Now you understand that the nature of what he's saying here is that he's causing a problem by talking about the nature of African Americans and putting them back in chains as a metaphor for what Romney would have done if he would have gotten elected. That is using a racial trope. So the question becomes, is that acceptable or not? Would you consider that acceptable use of that language? And many people would think it's absolutely not acceptable. And there was a lot of backlash of that. And this is way before the comments that he made this year. Now, there are much more words in language that go very deep in the heart of racial concepts as well as sexism. And I'm going to go through a few of them just to give you some ideas. You all said, man, that guy has a dark past. Now, that seems like a very harmless word, right? Not nasty. You don't think of it as any sort of problem. But the word comes from a minority group that was subjugated throughout history, that was used to demean that group. And for most people don't recognize that and think it's a harmless word. In other words, hysterical. Now, the question would be well, hysterical is a very interesting word. It means that, somebody who is suffering from hysteria, that they're out of control. But where does the word come from? For thousands of years, the concept of hysteria was used to shame and subordinate women. A French doctor used it in the 1800s for research on hysteria as a way to bring audiences to his lab to watch women writhe in ecstasy and to make fun of them in a sense of calling them hysterical. When we take out a woman's organs, her sex organs, we call it a hysterectomy because that was what was believed to create hysteria. The two were linked for a very long period of time. Indian giver. Now, this word has been used so many different times. I'll give you an example of this. The term Indian giver was used in 2011 by Kim Kardashian's mother, used in term on Good Morning America in relation to her daughter's ex-husband requesting the ring back after a 72-day marriage. Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank used the expression during a debate in 2011 with his co-host. Matt Lauer used the phrase while covering the 2012 London Olympics for NBC. There are two opposing thoughts about how the origin of this derogatory phrase got started. Does it refer to the early U.S. government giving the land to the Indians through signed treaties and then them breaking the treaties? Or does it date back earlier as another example of a culture clash when European settlers coming from a monetary economy did not understand bartering? When given an item, they did not realize that they would offer something back in return. And if something was not offered in return, the Native American at that point expected the offering to be returned. One side was bartering, the other thought they were getting gifts. So the other side, because of miscommunication, came up with a term to understand the concept. But you see how these terms and ideas become more ingrained and throughout society, and the difficulty when you have an in-group and an out-group, and how easy it is to start labeling, which then causes stereotypes and racism. Jew them down. The term Jew them down was born out of a stereotype formed during the medieval times about Jews being cheap and prone to hoard money. Often they were forced into financial occupations, and they were best known as moneylenders, leaving them vulnerable to anti-Semitic misrepresentations. Think of the portrayal of the Shylock in Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice. The term itself means to haggle or bargain for a lower price. The Oxford English Dictionary noted that the earlier usage of the term came in 1825, and that it was used in 1870 on the floor of the U.S. Congress to describe a bill settling salaries in the military. The legislation supposedly prompted someone to say that Congress is ready to Jew down and pay its generals. The president of Trenton, New Jersey, council earlier of September of 2019 said her city's assistant attorney was able to get the most out of a personal injury claim against the city. And they settled at a lower amount because they were able to wait her out and Jew her down. Trenton City Council President Kathy McBride made the remarks during an executive session of the council, also of September 5th of 2009, and later told New Jersey Globe she could not elaborate on her using the term because the laws that pertain to closed sessions. The idea is many of these terms, racially charged, have made their way into our discussion and words. While these words can be offensive to some, to other people say they become part of the culture. And where do you draw the line? Do you go out and take out every word ever used that has these stereotypes and racially charged words? The next one is bugger. In the Middle Ages, bugger was an offensive term for Bulgarians or a person of Eastern European descent. The word first used also to mean heretic by Roman Christians prejudiced against the Eastern Orthodox Christians. By 1700s, buggery was cropped up in English dictionary as sodomy or sin against nature. The word ghetto. The origin of this word are very messy, largely due to its association with racism, segregation throughout history. The word might, and again I say might because there's arguments about this, might have originated from the Italian borghetto, which by its definition meant little town, in the 1600s. But the ghettos were generally places restricted for Jews historically. Horribly grouping Jews together this way made it easier to send them later on to the death camps during the Holocaust and World War II. Do you take out that word? Mumbo jumbo. When somebody isn't making a lot of sense, we literally say, yeah, you're talking mumbo jumbo. But what does the word mean? A whole lot of mumbling. But mumbo jumbo probably comes from the name of a Western African god, Mamambo Jambu, apparently. He was a god used by men, and the tribesmen were utilized to be made fun of based upon the name of the god that they believed in, and they were being put down because of that. How about the term sold down the river? The phrase has been long used with betrayal. Its derivation of the American slave. The trade speaks volumes about one of the nastiest betrayals against the population ever perpetrated. And again, the reality that it comes from, the nature of this word, from a racial detriment to the slave traders. The slave traders would basically say, man, we sold him down the river, which was the idea that they were being betrayed and going back into slavery, not being freed. Fuzzy wuzzy, a term that we normally go with cute teddy bears, but it has a hateful history too. The word was first used in the 1800s by British soldiers colonizing campaign in East Africa. They called the members of the tribe fuzzy wuzzies because of their dark skin and curly hair. After that, the military people from Europe and North America used fuzzy wuzzy to refer to the native people of New Guinea, Australia, and Sudan. Do we take out that word? Hip hip hooray. Now, you wouldn't be cheering if you understood its origin of the word. It originated in 1819 as a series of riots against the Jews that broke out in Germany that spread to other parts of Europe. Troops had to be called in to protect the Jews from being killed. Many Jews fled their homes until things settled down. The riots were called Hip Hip Riots because the riots rallying cries. So Hip Hip Hooray came from that. No can do. Most of us think of this phrase as milder, I can't do it. Right? No can do. But actuality, it was a phrase that mimicked the Chinese people in America that spoke English. And it was done with a twang to it to be able to put down the Chinese people at that time period. Peanut gallery. Another term that you think, well, what's the difference with that? As after all, we all know that cheap seats was considered the peanut gallery. But it was popular for patrons to throw things like peanuts and shells at the actors if they didn't like what they saw on stage. And it made a class distinction that basically, if you were in the peanut gallery, you were the poor people. And basically, we want to go and put people to make them feel that way. Uppity. It seems that uppity, which originally recorded a collection of African-American folktales known as Uncle Remus stories from the 1880s, apparently the term was used by blacks about other blacks that they thought were too self-assertive. So the issue is in order to tell other African Americans you're being uppity and you're going to get us into trouble, they would use that term. And it was a racially charged term. Gyp. The slang word for cheat or swindle. You gyp me out of that. But the reality is, again, that the association between gypsy and the Roma people, that when you complain that someone gypped you, you are basically perpetuating a stereotype that the gypsy people are swindlers and servants and not cool. As you see, there are word after word, and by the way, there are so many more. And I could go on. So the question is, do we take out all these words? Do we make sure people don't say these words? Do we create the entire language to be devoid of the history where these things came from? Do we stop people from making jokes? Do we create a world where everybody is so sensitive that you can't say or do anything? And I don't know if that is a better world to live in. And I probably think it probably wouldn't be, but that's my opinion. I believe more in the Daryl Davis idea of dealing with these types of mentality. And Daryl Davis is an African American who went to Klan meetings to create dialogue. And he ended up changing the minds, I think, of 20 or 30 Klan people. And they gave him their robe when they left the Klan. He's basically somebody that has changed their minds. Not through words and saying you're horrible for believing this and putting them down, but from dialogue and understanding. And I think it's important when you say something to be able to take the idea that, okay, it's possibly to be offensive to somebody. And that's why we always have the ability to say we're sorry. We always can explain, I did not mean that in a negative connotation. I was trying to be funny or make a joke. As we know, sometimes bad jokes don't land well and can look very bad. The bigger problem is when people don't recognize their own racial ideology and tendencies. That's much more dangerous than making a joke in bad taste or making a stereotypical joke in bad taste. It's much worse when you have certain beliefs about people because of the group that they're born into, or because of the group that they're in, or because of the sexual orientation, or because of their sex. Every individual is an individual. And while there are certain truths that we do have, example, predominantly, men throw baseballs at much higher velocities than women. And that's just a statement of fact. But that does not mean you're not going to find a woman that can throw a baseball faster than a man. It just means on average that's the case. It doesn't mean as an individual that's the case. And this is where people get things very confused. It's like you're part of that group. And I've heard this one so many times. Oh man, those Jews, they're all rich. Every Jew's rich? There's never been a poor Jew. If you go to the welfare lines, and I've had clients that needed to be on welfare who were Jewish. Wow, how did those Jews not get to be rich? I thought all of them were rich. And black people, if you listen to Biden, all of them are poor. He actually made another comment about that as well, when he said you could be one of those rich white kids or African American. It's mind-boggling because, again, that goes back to groupthink. That the idea is that if you're black, you must be poor. I promise you, Michael Jordan's kids are much better financially off than I am. That's just a statement of fact. Will Smith's kids are in better financial shape than I am, as well as so many others. The nature by which we talk about these things and we believe we know because you're part of this group, then therefore you fit this box, is a fallacy. But if we have open dialogue, if our desire is not to harm, if we are in good nature and we're trying to actually be cute or funny, more often than not, it won't be an issue. I will say in all my years, I've definitely made jokes with people in different cultures and different situations. And more often than not, absolutely, they found it funny and in good nature. Once in a while, somebody will take offense. And I apologize profusely and explain that was not at all my intent. The idea was just to be funny or to try to catch a line, not in any way to be hurtful or harmful. And again, much more often than not, it's understood and actually it builds a better relationship. Because that understanding of being able to say, oops, I stepped on a toe, but I didn't mean to, is incredibly important. It's okay to make mistakes. We're human. The problem is when we don't admit to it, when we don't fix it, and when we continue to perpetuate it. And as I said at the beginning of this video, when I did the Joe Biden video, the problem was the pundits, and those pundits are the people that are speaking from the media, who are all those people who are explaining what they believe. All of them try to make excuses for the ideology and the behavior instead of saying, this was flat out wrong, should not have happened, I am deeply sorry, and let me explain to you why this was wrong and why I shouldn't have said it. But that's not what goes on. What goes on is the spin of it, which is the always trying to explain how I'm trying to figure out a way to make this look better. And that's problematic. I think one person, and I saw this article in the paper written by some woman stating that why Joe Biden was right to write this. And I had nothing to say. It was so mind-boggling to me how anybody can believe to say to anybody, well, you have to fit this box in order to be there. And you must believe this or you must think this to be part of this group. And if you're not part of that group anymore. I didn't realize you can change somebody else that way. We are all individuals. We all need to care about one another and to have good communication in order to understand each other. And again, Jennifer, your question is that complex. Where do you draw the line? I don't know. Where do we say that's crossing the line? I don't know. I don't know where you draw it. I don't know where you say that's enough. But I do believe it's important to have the conversation. And it's okay to have the conversation. And it's okay to possibly offend somebody. But to also say, I am sorry, I had no intention to offend you. And to apologize for it. It's okay to try to be funny. And to apologize if you weren't. And it was hurtful to somebody. But I don't think we should throw humor out the window just because somebody could be offended. I don't think we shouldn't take chances because we're afraid to offend somebody. And I don't think we need to destroy and raid the dictionary because there is a racist, sexist past. I think that it's become a part of culture. It's there. And it's important to educate our children about it, to educate ourselves about it, so that we don't fall into these things, but understand what these words meant, what they used to mean, what they mean today, how they evolved, how we've changed, how we don't see the same things in the same way anymore. And actually, that's a good thing. And not to believe that it was not there anymore. I'll use another one, to whitewash it, which has another meaning. I hope that you like this video. I hope that you will subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And I hope you'll share it if you think it'll be helpful to somebody else. And I'd like you to share it even if it's not going to be helpful to anybody. But you can also hit the link below to become a patron by Subcribe-star. And I wish you a good night and good mental health.